Want. We're live?
Live, man.
Live?
You so live, I don't even know what to tell you.
Yeah.
We're live.
We're hot. So special thanks to KVAR. I want to thank everyone at KVAR.com. I want to thank everyone in the studio, Q, Marcy. We got an awesome episode today. Thanks to Monster Energy. They're fueling today. And then, of course, we have Pink Box Donuts. Q had 2 today. He's 1 step away from full-blown diabetic shock. We have, of course.
It's worth it.
It's worth it. We have Jesse Ray's Barbecue. Head over to Jesse Ray's if you're local in the Vegas area. He recently had a fire. He's super supportive of everything. Give that guy, some love. So Jesse Ray's Barbecue, awesome dudes down there. And special thanks to Immortal Coffee from Matt Brown. They've been, keeping Marcy on the straight and narrow, of course, and of course Laird Hamilton Superfoods for all the cool creamers. Today's guest is awesome. So I'm really excited to have this guy on. I've had a lot of different people in my life, kind of keep me on the straight and narrow path, especially as it pertains to training and focusing on training. This guy came into my life recently, but he's had a profound impact on kind of my thought process and how I look at things and simplifying it. And not only that, he's a Leo. He's just an all-around badass dude, and we share a little bit of a similar lineage, which gives us a huge connection with Straight Blast Gyms and SBG and SBGI. So I'm super excited about this. We have the one and only Chad LYMAN. So tough intro to beat, Chad. I want to and talk close into the mic. Pull it close to you. It moves. You can pull it real close. Pull it real close. Break it down for me. I want to dive right in. How you get sucked into this jiu-jitsu law enforcement world, because now we're seeing jiu-jitsu become such a big part of law enforcement. How does that take shape, and where does it begin? Does it begin at Portland State? Where does it start?
So for me, it started up in Portland, Oregon. I went to Portland State University, graduated from there, and got a job with the Portland Police Bureau out of college. They actually sponsored me, which was weird. I had a reverse GI Bill. They paid for my education, and then I had to sign up and say I'd give so many years of service, and they took some of that debt away. So it was kind of a really cool deal. Once I got on the department, I was a cop for about, within my first year, I started figuring out that even though I was willing to fight, I'd had some basic training in the academy. I've always lifted and ran and done those things, done team sports. I wasn't very good at controlling guys. And so I started looking for options. And that was where I started looking and saying, hey, if I'm going to do this for a living and part of my job is going to be to fight other humans, I should probably get good at fighting. And so that was kind of what got me started.
Right. So you start getting into it. And I noticed you've done a little bit of everything. You've done some jiu-jitsu, you've done some Krav, it seems like you've dabbled in a lot of things. What is there a better, and what makes jiu-jitsu better? I want to ask the loaded question. I know the answer, and I understand what law enforcement goes through, because it doesn't look good on TV to throw strikes and things like that. So what is it about jiu-jitsu that sets it apart?
So not only does it, for me, it's not the perception necessarily, although that's a big part of it, right? For me, I want to dominate encounters with other human beings. And the best way to dominate an encounter is to dominate positionally.
Right.
So wrestling becomes very important. Jiu-jitsu becomes very important. And if I want to add striking in, all my striking from MMA is a legitimate source. So when I first started looking to train, I tried some straight stand-up systems. I tried some traditional systems. None of those gave me the subject control of my adversary, and that's where jiu-jitsu gives me kind of that missing link. And I would add wrestling as well, though.
Yeah, wrestling. The rise of wrestling the last few years is definitely visible. You can see it in some of these guys coming out. I mean, you have Lance Palmer, you have Ben Askren, of course, when he was dominating before retirement. Obviously before the UFC, but you have so many different factors. So I think, jiu-jitsu now is becoming such an important piece of the puzzle with law enforcement. I could see it, down in Tampa, they have a program, I believe it's all of Tampa PD or that area. They get to go to jiu-jitsu and they'll cover the cost. Do you foresee things like that starting to come into play where the onus gets put more back on the officer to pursue the training and the department will reimburse or kick in some type of reimbursement, or do you think that's like a one-off?
Well, I think that's a forward progressive thinking department because they're looking at the problem and they're saying, hey, if we allow our officers to go train and we supplement that. Now, if your department won't do that, that's what you should be doing if you're out there listening. You ought to be flipping training on a regular basis because at the end of the day, my chief's not going to go to my call. I'm going to go. My administration's not going to go down to 123 Anywhere Street and fight anybody in the house.
Right.
I'm going to go do that. And so it's necessary for me to go do that. I applaud chiefs and or departments that are forward-thinking enough to say, hey, we're going to supplement this, but if they don't, it's on you.
Yeah, there's no doubt the buck stops with the individual. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to get your diet right, get your mind right, and you have to pursue the training in the first place, right?
Yeah.
But you kind of go into SBG, and that's where you made your bones training and made your reputation, and you progress all the way to black belt. For those out there that are getting started that are on the street, kind of give them a little bit of advice, Chad. How do you go from being, a white belt, green as can be, still working, pushing a car, and then to a black belt? Because if you think you want to quit just as a white belt, you probably wanted to quit 50 times along the way or 100 times. How do you keep a positive mindset along the way and have a family and have mouths to feed and have people to answer to?
So the way I've done it is I've created a few formulas that really work for me, and one of them is the idea that I'm going to train anyway, and time's going to go by anyway. So these two truths, time's going to advance whether I train or not. It's going to pass, and I'm going to work out in some way. That's necessary for my job, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I look at those two truths and I commit myself that I don't lift as many weights nearly as what I used to. I don't have a 24-hour membership. I'll do weights or whatever in my garage. I've got a few kettlebells. I've got some dumbbells. I've got pull-up bars. I'll do that stuff in my garage or at the gym. But my training sessions 2 to 3 times a week are fighting. They're combatives. And so that's one way that I start to balance that is I've just got to put time towards it and effort towards it. And then the second thing is I've just got to be committed that even though it's going to take me a long time, I don't focus on the black belt. I'm going to train the rest of my life, John. I hope the week I die, I'm on the mats. That's the goal.
It was funny. Last night, Casey brought up a good point. He goes, the easiest progression is after a couple of years of purple is brown to black. And he said, the reason I think that is you're already in it for life at brown. You know what I mean? You're already there forever. He goes, we pretty much you pretty much sweat it out to purple. And then, at that point, it's a matter of time and bringing it all together and being able to articulate it. And that's and I don't want to take words out of his mouth. That's kind of how he put it. At what point does it click in your career that you're like, this is it, I'm in this forever? What's the aha moment?
For me, it was when new guys started coming in and I started rolling with them, and suddenly I'm doing very, very well. And I haven't noticed a discernible change on the guys in my room who are already better than me, right? Because what happens is initially guys toy with you because you're horrible, because you don't train. No matter what you look like in a T-shirt, you're not good at fighting unless you practice fighting. So you can pass the eyeball test and wear medium and do all that crap.
I'm living proof of that.
And do all that crap. You're tough, actually. But and you don't realize you're progressing. It's very, very slow. It's not. There's no quick fix to this. And the other thing that was eye-opening is when I would have struggles at work, and the difference between me getting in a struggle at work prior to training, within 6-7 months, I was noticing a discernible difference in my ability to control guys on calls who didn't want to be controlled. And so those two things were really game-changing for me and allowed me to stay focused. But I literally just said, man, this is part of my job. For me, this was part of my job initially, and now you know how passionate I am.
Of course.
Now it's part of my life and my lifestyle. Chris Howder said something years ago, and he said, Chad, it's not, and he said this to other people. He didn't just say it to me, but he repeated it to me. He said it's not who's good, it's who's left. It's
a war of attrition.
Oh, dude, I've seen such talented dudes come and go, and it's just staying at it and staying with it over the long haul. That's the key.
Yeah, and it's funny. There's so much to be said about that, but you look at guys that they're stars on the rise. Like you have Nicky Rodriguez. You have certain people that kind of jump out at you. Do you ever get the bug to want to give some of these guys advice or kind of guide them, or do you feel like you kind of stay in your lane? And because you approach it from a DT perspective, and when people don't realize. Yes, there's different mindsets going into jiu-jitsu. What I like about how you teach is you teach it from a real-world practical standpoint. And people don't fully understand. There's MMA, there's ADCC, there's all those different things. Do you ever feel like, some of these guys, you want to grab them by the neck and say, look, you get so much talent. You know what I mean?
Well, so if it's one of my guys, yes. Nicky Rod's doing fine. He doesn't need to hear anything from me. If he ever wants to talk to me, that's cool. I totally respect him. He's got a better guy than me leading him. John's phenomenal. But to take that example, certainly I've had guys that are very, very talented, that are young, that can do good things. And yeah, I'll have conversations with them as long as I have a relationship with them.
Yeah.
I won't overstep. I'm not going to talk to a guy blind necessarily. If it feels right and it's going to be positive and it's going to reinforce what he's already doing and add to him, I might open my mouth to him. Otherwise, I'll just kind of let their coaches kind of handle that. But certainly I've had those conversations as recently as a week ago. I used to be more involved on the MMA side as well and cornering guys, but I started judging fights. And so I've stopped cornering. Anybody I've ever cornered is retired now, and I really focus on the jiu-jitsu. And then, like you said, I really focus on fight functional jiu-jitsu is what I call it.
Yeah.
If I was in a fist fight, would my jiu-jitsu still work? If I was in the dude has a knife, can I do jiu-jitsu? The dude wants to take my gun, can I use jiu-jitsu or wrestling or MMA? It's not just jiu-jitsu, but jiu-jitsu plays a huge part of that.
Speaking of the gun, I want to get into something that's important because all the IG warriors out there, the shoot fast guys, everybody that's a tactics expert, and I got a lot of guys out there that'll love this topic. How much of a false positive is it on the internet and in life, these guys that go out, they just buy a gun and they want to be like shoot fast guys?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, it's silly. I'll always hear both from the reality self-defense guys and from the gun guys, the weapons-based guys.
Mm-hmm.
I'll hear there are no rules in the street, or I'll hear I'll just shoot them. And I'll hear this from cops too. And the first fallacy there is there's a ton of rules in the street. It's called the law. You can't run around and do silliness to people because they asked, they made a mean face at you, so you poke their eyeball out. You can't do irreparable harm to someone because you have a verbal altercation with them. You're going to go to prison. That's what's going to happen to you. There's a ton of rules in the street. The only guy who doesn't have rules in the street are criminals, bad guys. So if you don't count yourself among them, then you have a bunch of rules. So that's number one, is this idea that I'll just resort to this extreme force to any level threat is false, lawfully. Number two, you're not going to do it because you're actually a good human being. You actually, as a police officer, I've been involved in critical incidents where people have lost their lives. I don't relish that. I don't want that. That is hard. Those experiences stay with you. They change. They take part of you when it happens. And so unless you're a weirdo, you're not just going to shoot people. And if you're that guy who's just going to shoot people, then you need to go to prison, or maybe someone needs to shoot you. I don't know.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, as you know, is rampant in the gun side of the community, because you have these guys that get out there and they make these videos and they create what's called training scars. They get out there and they say, you got to have a sub-second draw, you have to do this. And I asked the simple question, Tony's asked it, a bunch of us, how are you going to articulate that? How does that make sense?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And now you have the guys that just throw a little fist at the paper and then they shoot. I still don't know what that is. Because how do you articulate that?
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, it drives me crazy to see a video of, or a knife defense guy. So, John, you push me or take a swing at me, and then I pull my knife out and I stab you 7 times to cut your throat. You're going to prison. Like, that's the end of that. I'm not going to do that to another human being. And B, even if I were to do that, that means I'm going to jail. The other side of that is for people to think about that are listening to this podcast. I've worked 20 years in law enforcement now, in busy cities for busy departments. I've never promoted. I've always stayed on the operations side. My current job, I'm not out in the street, but I've been in the street the majority of my time hunting these bad guys. And I don't have multiple shootings. And I've been looking for them for 20 years and engaging with them, and I've taken too many guns off the street. I can't even count the number of guns I've taken off bad guys, and I'm not getting in shootings. So for you to walk around and think your gun is the answer to your next problem, I've been looking for problems for 20 years in a lawful manner, and the gun's not the answer to my problem. So it's just a false sense of nonsense security, and go train, man. Train with your hands.
Yeah, I think that's I think the number one. And I want to get your take on this, Chad. I think the number one is you have to start with nutrition, right?
Yeah.
You have to take care of your body. You have to be hydrated.
Why did you feed me donuts?
Because I'm trying to break you down. The only listen, don't laugh, Marcy. The only chance I have.
Get 'em, Chad.
And yeah, the reason, like when I have these folks in, these great folks, you know, Q knows what I'm doing. I'm trying to drug
Fatten
them.
you up.
I'm trying to drug them in a way, so I have a chance.
You know what's interesting is you had a donut, but there was only it's like the size of a donut hole. For all I know, you cut that up and threw it away.
The funniest thing,
and you were simulating eating a donut, and then you were like, "Hey, you eat a donut."
The funniest thing with me is, and this is super inside baseball, I never really talk about this. I post all this crazy stuff. I bring all these donuts in, but I actually eat a lot healthier than I advertise, than I let on.
You do. I'm looking at you.
And I train a lot harder than sometimes I let on. But I kind of I'm one of those people, like they used to say, okay, so here's a good example. Q, this will make sense to you too. They were saying when they filmed The Predator, Arnold would wake up at 4 a.m. and go train before everybody else. So the pump looked natural. Yeah. You know what I mean? He'd walk on set, and in that alone, like they used to say in the Boston Garden when the Celtics played, the 16 banners were good for at least a 5-point lead right off the bat. So it's kind of like it gives that sense. Now, when you get me on the mat, as you know, or you get me on the street, I'm worthless. You know, and I'm a liability. I'm a total liability. So that's the way I like to be. You know, it's kind of one of those things. I've always had that mindset.
Yeah.
You know, look at my left hand while I have to get an advantage. I have to get a little bit of an advantage. So I gave Chad 2 or 3 donuts just to get him slowed down a little bit so I could handle him in case things got a little weird in here.
I ate one, and he offered me 2 or 3, and I declined the others, but I did eat one.
Yeah.
Well, he wants me to leave with the box.
I was like, take it home, enjoy.
Holy cow.
But I think it starts with, and this is common sense stuff, but people got to kind of understand, it's all building blocks. It starts with a diet. It leads into some level of weight training, and it doesn't have to be Olympic. You know, people get crazy with the deadlifts. I loved it when I think it was Mark, whoever it was on Rogan said, people who deadlift, for deadlift's sake, he thinks it's worthless. Not that it's worthless, but you're going to hurt yourself. You're going to tear something. I think at the very least you should be able to move your body weight around. Okay. And then I think the next layer to that is you should be doing some type of dynamic stretching or dynamic movement. And I think you should, whether it's yoga or Pilates, whatever you enjoy, and then you should incorporate some level of combatives, then pick up the gun. That's my theory. But, it just speaks to the overall mindset of people. It's the quick fix. What do you suggest to folks when they say, Chad, I want to defend myself. I want to defend my family. Where do you start?
So I think more in terms of, first off, I'll say the diet or the conditioning is important, and you need to have it. You need to be functional and be able to move. And I like the body weight stuff, minimum, right? If you do more, good on you. But then it's going to be, I'm going to encourage them to go and find some kind of MMA-based and BJJ-based program that incorporates some kind of striking, takedowns or takedown defense, and then work on the ground. And once you start to get a good, solid foundation in those 3 areas, and you don't have to spend equal time on them.
Right.
So I strike about once a week, sometimes twice. I'll try to do some kind of striking, including some sparring, controlled. But I'm sparring once a week. So I'm sparring about, on my stand-up, I'm doing about 4 times a month. And occasionally I'll work in extra sessions on stand-up, right? I'll work in a weapons-based thing once, maybe twice a month. Training knives, guns, retaining guns. I did weapon retention last night, for example, with a buddy, right? So we did gun out of the holster, retaining the gun, and we drilled that, but we did it after we practiced chokes with a T-shirt and a sweatshirt. And so we combined the grappling, and then we started introducing weapons. So get that solid foundation of, forget about beating a guy with a knife or a gun. Can you beat a dude who just wants to punch you in the face? Get that done first. The ninja guys will say, what if you had 7 guys? What if he had a car and he ran you over? What if he had 7 dogs with him? None of that matters if you can't beat up one dude. So just get to the point where you can handle yourself versus a single adversary. Start building on that, and then we can start adding layers to that later. But I need you to be fundamentally sound. And that's what I encourage guys to do. And I encourage them to do it through boxing and or Muay Thai, wrestling, possibly some judo, and then some jiu-jitsu or submission grappling on the ground.
It's easier than it sounds if you break it down. And what I try to tell people, the other piece of advice I give Chad all the time is don't overwhelm. People say all the time, I can't get started. I don't know where to start.
Yes.
And I always say, go 1 day a week.
That's it.
Go 2 days a week. We had a talk, you and I, and, I was talking about, training and everything else, and you dumbed it down in a way that no one had really dumbed it down to me, in this way. You said, you just need to train, man, whether it's 1 day a week or 5 days. You just need to train.
Yeah, I don't care the frequency. The frequency can change over time. There's times you might be able to train more. There's times you might be able to train less. But I need, especially guys like you, John, guys like you and I, this is part of who I am. And if I give up training and I say, okay, I'm too busy, I'm too hurt, I'm too whatever, I'm going to lose a part of me. That's a culture, that's a band of people that I can identify with that are my brothers. And when we step on that mat and we shake hands, we start working on stuff, it doesn't matter what political party I am anymore. It doesn't matter what my religious faiths are. It doesn't matter who I voted for in the last election. It becomes all about being on that mat and spending that time and challenging myself, having some success, some failure. I always tell my kids, I say, hey, winning's temporary, it comes and goes. Losing's temporary, it comes and goes, but not doing it is forever. Quitting is forever. If I choose to opt out because it's too hard or I didn't get the result I wanted right away, so I'm just gonna pack it up and give up. That is the only thing that's permanent. Everything else is temporary. Wins are temporary, losses are temporary. Quitting is permanent. My one boy was getting bullied by a kid. It's an age-old story, right? And I was talking to my son, and he said the first reason he didn't fight back is and I didn't even realize this as a dad. It was kind of an aha moment.
And your son's a big dude. He's the one I met, right?
Yeah. He's big
dude.
for his age, right? And he says, he starts saying, I'm having a hard time going to school, Dad. I'm going to be sick. He's not really sick. We're like, what's going on? He says, well, these kids have been bullying me. There's 2 boys in particular. His mom and I said, why didn't you fight back? And he says, well, Dad, you expect me to obey the rules at school and be respectful of my teachers and stuff? And I said, yeah. And he goes, well, they don't let me fight. I'm not allowed to fight. And so he says, I don't know what to do because I know you'd be mad at me if I did something wrong.
Right.
And I said, it kind of, I was like, where I grew up, you got picked on a lot and you had to fight a lot. But my kids have a nicer neighborhood than me, and I hadn't had this talk with him. He's my second to last kid. And I said, buddy, somebody puts their hands on you or convinces you they're going to put their hands on you, and you have to defend yourself, then defend yourself. That's the reason we're doing all this training, and you love it. You can defend yourself. He says, oh, okay. And then he says, well, there's a couple of them. And I said, oh, are you nervous and scared? And he says, yeah. And I said, do you still want to, like, defend yourself? Do you feel like, man, I should do something after they do something to you? And he says, yeah, I feel that way. And I said, whether you win or lose, that'll take a very short amount of time, because once the fight starts, they're going to break it up, right?
Right.
He's going to get in however many shots he gets in. The other guy might punch him. He's going to punch the other guy. And I said, whether you win or lose, how you feel there will pale in comparison to how you feel right now. You will never get the stink off of not fighting him if you allow him to talk to you that way every day, or touch you, or grab you by the face, because the kid had grabbed him. I said, don't ever let him grab you again. If he does, then we'll homeschool you if they want to suspend you. And you have my full support. You go start fights, or you're the bully, you know you're going to catch it from mom and dad. But you defend yourself, son, we'll homeschool you. And I'll tell the school, I'll homeschool you every time anybody touches my kid, he's going to fight. And that kind of made him feel better. And I said, all this stuff you feel will never go away. So then the next week comes, he stands up to the kid. They don't have to fight. Now the kid says he likes him. It's the same story a lot of us had growing up, where we used to fight.
Yeah, some kids, Chad, they weren't hugged enough as a child. You know what I mean? And like, you get these kids that their way of showing affection is like they punch you in the stomach, and it's a schoolyard thing. Yeah. But
I want them to hug the kid, trip the leg, get on top, hug the arm.
Exactly.
Take it home with them.
Trap them. And then, but the thing is, I always said this growing up in Boston, because it's been glamorized, whether it's through movies and other bullshit. They say, like, it looks like this tough. I said, look, where I grew up, growing up in East Boston, you're going to get in a fight. There's no two ways about it. Yeah. You learn how to get punched in the face, and you say, okay, I don't like that. It's really simple. And as time goes on, I had the best advice given to me in high school at a young age by a football coach. He looked at me, he goes, man, when you're bad, play fast. When you're worse, play faster. And that made sense to me. So by the time I got to college, I was always, the minute it felt confrontational, it was going to get weird. And this isn't good advice. Don't take it. I would always throw the first punch, because like you said, it's going to get broken up or something's going to happen. So you get that first real good stinger in there. You know what I mean? And don't take this advice to people who are listening, but you get that first stinger in there, and nobody ever knows how bad you really are. You really
That's
are.
Right. It's over.
It's over.
Quick,
so you get that first one in, and then you can walk away. So when you're bad, play fast. When you're worse, play faster. It's the best advice you could ever get. It doesn't. Don't take the advice, but it does apply. You have to know where your skill set is at, and I'm not advising anybody go out there and throw the first punch. But you're absolutely right. Today in society, it's changed so much, and I'm sure over the years in law enforcement, you've seen it change so much in the street, that we have this culture where people are, they don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers. It's one of those worlds now. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. You can't catch a break. And there's no easy way to fix it, because we're in such a gotcha culture. Everybody wants to, it's someone else's fault, and they lawyer up, and they want to sue you, and everything else in between. Now, we could spend 3 hours trying to fix that. But the reality is, in self-defense, and this is something that I feel very strongly about, you have to be able to defend yourself on a fundamental level.
Yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt. And so I always tell guys, and fundamentals, John, is different than basics. I'll hear basic swim fights. And to me, a basic is, I got to explain to you what the closed guard is, what the half guard is, what is a butterfly guard, what's the mount, those are basics, right? So you could know basic positions and still not be able to fight your way out of a paper bag. Fundamentals, like you said, are my definition of a fundamental is what's necessary for the fight you're in. So I need to have fundamentals in stand-up. I need to have fundamentals in wrestling, in the clinch. I need to have fundamentals on the ground. I even train fundamentals for what if I'm injured? What if something doesn't work?
Handicaps, yeah.
Yeah, what if I have a weapon system? What if I don't? What if he has one? So I'll look at fundamentals for all these things. And around the fundamentals, I'm going to come up with core or key principles or concepts. And so I didn't start this. This is, you mentioned SBG. When I first got started way back when in Portland, Oregon with Matt Thornton, and Rob Follis was a blue belt at the time, and he was a lead instructor. Dennis Davis, who leads Extreme Couture's MMA team, one of our lead coaches over there. Dennis was a teammate of mine in Portland, Oregon, in a dingy gym off MLK Boulevard. And Randy came into that gym when Randy started fighting in the UFC. Dan Henderson came through those doors. We saw a lot of guys over the years, Nate Quarry, a lot of guys over the years training out of that camp. And then that camp eventually split, and you had Team Quest was born with Rob and with Randy, and then Matt stayed his own thing, and his thing's grown over the years. That was my start. And in that dingy gym in Portland, and I say that with affection. That could come off really wrong.
No, it doesn't to me.
It just was old school.
Yeah,
right?
Jay Cutler refers to every gym as a dump. He's like, it's a dump.
It was just old school. It was. We had a ring. We had mats. Matt had this building that had columns that you had to wrestle around a couple of the columns, but there was magical things happening in that gym. That was a very, very good laboratory where we would explore what's really going to work in a fight and what's not. And it was principle and concept based. It wasn't, hey, I'm going to teach you 17 moves or 3 techniques today. They may cover 3 techniques in the class that day, but all those techniques would be around similar principles and or concepts. And the idea was that you were going to learn the principles and concepts, and the technique was the application of those. So the principles and concepts trumped everything. The technique came and went. You could have 12 different techniques you could do off these principles or concepts, and none of them mattered to Matt or Robert. Your body style might decide what you prefer. Your personality might decide it. There's a number of things that could decide it. But I was taught this principle and concept-based way from day one, first stepping on a mat. And that's been massively important to me because I came into it in my 30s. I didn't have a martial arts background. I had played football, basketball, and baseball in high school and team sports. I was a small college type athlete. I wasn't a D1 athlete, nothing like that. And it allowed me to make quicker gains. So then I went from Thornton's place to Beaverton Straight Blast Gym, which at the time was Mike Chapman and Tom Overhue. They eventually split, which is common in the industry, as you know.
Yeah.
Guys go their own way. Well, Mike Chapman became Impact Jiu-Jitsu, and I stayed affiliated with Mike my whole jiu-jitsu career, as did Rob Follis. We both ended up getting our black belts through Mike Chapman. I moved to Vegas in 2004 and have been blessed to train with great teams here, but I've always had a connection with Mike going back to those early days. Always had a connection that's favorable to Matt Thornton. Matt and I haven't trained together for years, but we still stay in touch, and I respect very much. He has a massive network of dudes spreading the truth through that fundamental basis that you were just referring to.
Yeah, no, it's a great program, and I was lucky to start out in it. And you brought up a lot of points I want to get to in that segment. I want to begin with Randy. How's Randy doing, and are you in touch with him?
So
give us a Randy update.
Just peripherally, just a quick text. Hey, I'm glad you're okay. And then I think one message or something. But he's amazing. So as a human being, he's amazing. He's treated me like a close friend, even though really I could be just an acquaintance, just a guy who knows him. But Randy treats me as though we're close friends. And because of that, we are friends. But we're friends because Randy Couture is not too big for his own britches, I guess, for lack of a better word. He's just a down-to-earth, kind person.
I remember I met him. I was with Tony and I think Branch Warren and a few people. We had the luxury of meeting him at the Arnold Classic a couple of years back. It's nothing he'd remember, but it was the oddest. I just remember this because it was the oddest table ever, Chad. It was like Randy, Chuck Zito.
Okay.
Yep, and who's the dude from Frank Dukes?
Okay.
And think about how weird this table is. And then, oh God, who else were they with? Frank was there, Chuck Zito, Mel Chauncey, who's an IFBB guy, IFBB pro guy. And I remember seeing him come by, and Tony and I kind of mushed him in the face and went over to Frank because, like, it's Frank Dukes. And I remember asking Frank if he could perform the dim mak. Tony asked him if it was real. It's like that's the $1 million question. Can you break a board at the bottom or a brick or whatever? But yeah, it was a funny thing, and I have a picture actually. If you don't have a photo, it didn't happen, but I have a picture of it, and it was really a funny night. It's just like one of those tables that I felt like I was in the Star Wars cantina.
Yeah.
I just didn't know what was going to happen, but we walked in that hotel lobby, and there was everybody. So most of the time they know who Tony is. We kind of let's start hanging out and chatting and Branch and those guys. So it was a lot of fun. But talk to me a little bit about Robert Follis and what that meant to you, and obviously the loss that means to that gym and kind of the community.
So, Rob Follis, one of my best friends ever for my whole life. I think about him almost every week. I kept his last voice message that I have. I actually kept that. He just... phenomenal teacher, phenomenal coach, great human being, dear friend. And the loss is for me personally, because I have some personal beliefs religiously where I do feel like the spirit goes on, and that's my own belief, and I feel like I'll get to see him again, and I find comfort in that. Absent that, it would be even worse than it is to not have him here, and is very, very hard. And the other thing that was very hard for me was I didn't realize it was happening. I knew Rob struggled for a lot of his adult life, and he struggled for the right reasons. He was challenged by folks that he loved that those relationships were not as productive as he wished they were. And it wasn't like Rob wasn't suicidal because Robert didn't feel like he was popular enough or he wasn't successful enough or any of that stuff. It was Robert felt like there were some holes in him personally that couldn't get bridged. And I knew he struggled with that long term, like throughout his life. And here was the magic of Rob Follis. Here's a guy who has depression levels that eventually take his life, and most people don't know it. And he's living with that every day. And that was one thing that was magical about him, is that guy could be suffering in silence in his own mind, in his own spirit, and he could see you and say, man, I think John's having a bad day, and he would take time out and he would go and serve you. And I think that was the answer to his longevity, because his depression was significant. And the answer to his longevity was he spent way more time worried about how other people felt and how could he make them better than he did worrying about himself. Ultimately, is that a cause? I don't know, and I don't know. But maybe it's a reason that he was able to have the impact he was able to have, despite having a long-term battle with how he felt about himself and how he felt about what was going on inside of him. Yeah, he had lost his brother. He had lost his family through choices they had decided through their personal beliefs. That their relationship, his parents were estranged with him based on a difference in faith, where they felt like he had chosen inappropriately, and so they had you know, like you say, without speaking for Rob, but having spoken to Rob many times, I know this was at the core of a lot of the battle that he was facing. And so the hardest thing for me is the week that Robert left. I had gone out of town to teach in Portland, Oregon. I was teaching a bunch of cops and teaching some ground fighting and different stuff. So I'm up in Portland teaching, and I get a call from one of his brothers, and they say, "Hey, we're concerned. We don't know where Robert is." And the problem is there's a fight in Canada this weekend. He was cornering an athlete. He didn't make the trip. And what I knew about Robert from all our years together was even when he was down, he would go to work. He wouldn't take it off. And certainly if he had a commitment to you, he wouldn't ditch out on his commitment to you because he didn't feel good. So he was an on-demand guy. He would perform at a high level even when he wasn't at his best personally. And so when they said he didn't go, that was when I knew we really had a problem. And I was trying to call him, and he wasn't picking up. And then I called into the PD just to say to the guys, "Hey, you got to let me know if we find him." And then unfortunately they did find him, and he had taken his own life. But and then that was crushing at the time. That was very, very painful. Not in an I'm mad at him way or anything like that. More twofold. Number one is that my friend died probably scared and probably alone, and that's how he died. And that is terrifying to me. And you want to be there, you know. And then the second thing is, can you do something that might affect
Could you have done something?
Yeah, and I really feel the answer is no. He knew I loved him, and I don't know. So those are the two things, though.
It's
you know what I'm saying?
It's hard, and I couldn't imagine, having to deal with that. And it's one of those things in these communities. You brought up one excellent point in there. Sometimes it's not about money or, like you said, popularity. Jason Harrison, who owns Sika Clothing, played for the Broncos briefly, went on to own Kuyu Clothing, took his life, and he, we shared a mutual friendship with Donald Trump Jr. And, I remember when that happened, he and I had met briefly, and he was such a great dude. I mean, he had just sold half of his shares in Kuyu. He was worth $50 million. He had sold Sika.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things you could not put a finger on, and he was such a huge influencer in that outdoor market. I mean, he changed the whole game. He loved hunting. He had a huge, zest for life, and it was one of those things. And before that, I'll never forget this, because you never forget where you are. The industry, the Leo community lost a huge, a great guy, police fitness, Curtis Bartlett, who was a sheriff over in, a deputy sheriff over in West Virginia. I'll never forget it. And he didn't commit suicide. He was on a call, and I'll never forget this. It was super late at night, and when the phone rings, it's never a good thing at that hour. Yeah. And I'll never forget, Tony had actually called me, and he said, "Dude, he's like, I got to tell you," he's like, Curtis passed away. And he was responding to a call. He died on the job. And it's one of those things. Similar to you, it's funny you bring up the voicemail. I saved his last voicemail. And I was one of the last people to talk to him that day. And it's one of those things that it's not, sometimes, with these passings, you kind of compartmentalize it in a way that you have to, some people, there's nothing you could do. It happens on the job. And then with others, there's no putting a finger on it. There's no specific thing you can point to. But you brought up another excellent point at the end there. Nobody ever likes to hear of anyone being alone and dealing with that. And even to an extent, you come across, like just today, I pick up the donuts at Pink Box. There's a homeless guy out there, just hanging out. and you know he's got some issues. You know, you give him a couple donuts, you hope he smiles, and you do this a lot probably with community policing and all that.
Absolutely.
It's just, you know, it's a couple bucks out of your pocket or whatever, but you just don't want someone, you know, to be alone or to feel alone or feel like there's, you know, not someone that can, and you never know what a phone call will do.
So without a doubt, and that's, you know, if you feel like you should make that call or reach out to somebody, I would encourage you to do so. And the one thing in law enforcement that has been brought painfully aware to me over the years, so I've had about, through training or car accidents, one training death and then car accidents and then actual officers being murdered. Since I've been on the job just over 20 years, I've had 17 different dudes that were on my agency. Some I knew, some I only knew peripherally. I didn't know them well. But 17 guys killed in the line of duty over the years. And then between the two agencies that I've worked for. And then the other thing is we've had several suicides. And I think the statement of, you know, everyone's fighting something and you never know what's going on inside of somebody, I think those are important for us to remember because you just don't know. And the last thing I'll say about Robert that was, I think, lasting, his legacy, obviously as a coach, for those of us who know, the dudes in the industry know that guy was a high-level, Hall of Fame level coach for his time on this earth. And then the second thing about Robert Falls, he would be a Hall of Fame type dude, is that he helped multiple people who had to feel the same way he felt at times. I've seen him reach out and lift others. And I know, and I knew him, and I knew some of the personal things he was doing. I used to watch him and know he was fighting some of the same things. And what he would do is he wouldn't commiserate with the person. He wouldn't go, oh, yeah, me too. Oh, yeah, let's both talk about how bad it. He would help that person feel like $1 million.
Right.
And so I watched this dude who's struggling help other dudes over and over. So those two legacies, I think Robert leaves behind. Everybody who knows him, I'll bet you could bring 20 people on and they'd say the same thing.
Yeah, there's no doubt that I didn't know him. A disclaimer. I've heard that, you know, obviously through the SPG system, through other, his name's come up a bunch of times. You know, I remember a few other coaches speaking affectionately about him and students. It was something I wanted to bring up and ask you because I know how close you guys were. It's not a secret, but you coming into, and I don't want to say, you know, taking on the role of kind of, you know, the mentor in that gym now. It's obviously difficult shoes to fill, but you do it so well. And I think you take on so much in there. It's not easy. You know, it can't be easy. It's one of those things. But somebody has to do it, and you're the best person for it.
Phenomenal team. I mean, Extreme Couture MMA is. I'm blessed and grateful to be there. You've got a guy like Eric Nixick helping run that pro team. You've got Ryan, Randy's son, intimately involved in the team and in the gym and the day-to-day operations. You got a guy like Dennis Davis, who is just he just sees things and they develop, and he coaches so well. You got a guy named Richie Castro on the jiu-jitsu side, who is a 10th Planet black belt.
Yep.
And he is a BJJ gi black belt. Richie Castro teaches conceptually, principle-based. I call him Yoda because I roll around with him. He's like a little Yoda. He's little and he's just murdering you. You know, you've got some of our brown belts who help out. The team over there is there's not a way to fail, and Robert certainly, I would say, had more of a singular impact than I do, but I'm smart enough to know my guys are great, and I'm smart enough to know my team is strong, and I give my guys a lot of leeway. My guys run their own classes. I don't know. I don't know, man.
It's a good vibe. Yeah,
It's a good vibe.
It's just a good vibe. I mean, that's.
And it's good in spite of me. I get to partake of it too. So I'm going to add to it. I understand it. I'm not going to deface it or or disappointed. It is important if you're going to coach or teach there that there's a little bit of a mantle, or I don't know what you'd call it. And so I like that, but at the same time, you got Ray Seffo, you got all these guys, like it's a who's who.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. And I love going in there on the Saturdays and training with you guys and spending some time. I want to ask a question. Actually, somebody asked a really good question. I can't take credit for it. Daryl asked, what do you suggest to folks that can't afford training classes? They can't afford to go to classes.
Okay, so a couple things. Number one, really look at what you're spending your time or money on and prioritize first off. So I've got to look seriously at myself. There may be those rare cases. Now, if I do that and I'm not eating out and I'm not going to the movies every weekend, and I don't smoke and drink and spend money on that or tobacco or whatever. I'm not buying the newest iPhone. I'm actually prioritizing my money. Usually a lack of funds is your spending issue and a priority issue and not a real lack of funds. But that could exist. So let's say it does. After I say all that, it exists. Look for Groupons. Many of the gyms will give a Groupon. Extreme Couture's running Groupons before that are $99 for 3 months. Total, $99. One time, pay $99, you can train for 3 months. So Groupons are a big thing. There are so many free resources online now that if you can't find access to material by some of the best guys in the world, over at PFC training, which is where I do my police and military training, when social media first started to pop, we're Neanderthals. We're like stone people. We want to write stuff down. We don't even.
Right.
Yeah, we're not computer literate. You were making fun of some guy before the show offline, and I'm going, he's talking about me. He doesn't know it, but he is. So I'm not social media. But what we thought, well, if we put it out there, no one will want to train with us because they could just take it for free. What actually happens is if you start to partake of that stuff, you actually want to go and do it.
It enhances the process.
It's better for me because guys will watch me and they'll go, yeah, I want to train with him. So I put out free stuff all the time, constantly now, because it's advertising.
Yeah.
It's advertising. Why am I on this show? It's not because I fought in the UFC. It's because of what I'm doing day to day, and that allows me to be informed that I'm very grateful for. So you have that online content that you can seek out. That's an option. Work a little more. I've never had one job. I'm a cop. I'm a full-time cop. I've never had I only worked this job as an adult.
It's funny. I had, a lot of people have made this suggestion. I say to folks, I don't know a gym in America. If you walked in there and walked up to a coach, okay, and you said, listen, I don't have a lot of money. I'd like to train a couple days a month or whatever. This is what, because usually if you don't have a lot of money, I would hope your schedule doesn't permit you to train a lot, right? Because hopefully you're working and you know what I mean? So you say, hey, I can only train 4 times a month or 5 times a month, but I don't have a lot of money. And if you approach it the right way with any coach and you say, I'll do anything. I'll fling trash.
Yep.
If I have to. I'll do the mats. There's not a coach in America that wouldn't look at you, whether it was you, I know you, Casey, I'll even speak for Chris Engel, I'll talk anybody. You go out to them and you say, hey, look, I'll clean the mats at the end of the day. You know what they'll probably more than likely say? They'll probably say, listen, if you'll do that or, come, when you get money in your bank account, we'll talk. Come, train, we'll give you 3 months or we'll give you a month, get on your feet, figure it out. There's no one that'll turn you away. I don't believe that. I 100% don't believe. And if they do, call me. Yeah. I'll set you up with somebody and I'll find somebody for you in the town that you're in if I have to. But it has to be legitimate. You have to be, somebody that's working, 70, 80-hour weeks trying to piece it together, and you're paying, all kinds of bills or medical bills and so on and so forth. And then somebody will make it happen. But if you're totally capable of working and you're just one of these people that's looking for a free ride. No, that's not what I'm talking about.
Well, and you won't stick with the training anyway. Training's hard. Like you'll quit. It doesn't do me any good if you have no internal ethic or drive or work ethic. You're not going to be here in a month anyway. So I think that's a viable option too. And I was going to bring that up as well. As a lot of places we have guys at almost every gym I've ever been involved with that were doing things for the gym.
Yeah, of course.
And trading that out, if you will. So yeah, that happens as well. Listen, you got to stay after it, and it depends on what you want. So, and this could be with anything. Like I used to play a lot of softball and a lot of basketball leagues and that kind of thing. But as I've gotten older and then I've had my own kids, my wife and I have 8 children. We have 3 daughters and 5 sons together.
It's a full house.
Yes, 8 is enough. It's awesome. Been married 30 years. My wife's amazing. She's still excited when she calls me on the phone, so she's awesome. Well, through that process, though, if I want to do the training and I want to coach and I want to do these things, which I do, then I give up some other things.
Of course.
And it's all prioritization. I don't have any beer league, softball leagues I belong to because I'm going to spend time with my family. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to earn money. I'm going to go train. And that's kind of what I do.
As time goes on, in life, time becomes the commodity.
Oh,
and it becomes
goodness.
the most precious commodity. I've explained that, when I go to a lot of gyms, and you know how it is, and you and I have had this talk. I'm not someone who can go to 7 competitions a month. I'm not someone that, can give 50 hours a week. I've been training long enough. I give what I can, and what I can is a lot to me.
Sure.
Into my, my world. But the reality is, time becomes the commodity as you get older. So I put more, no offense to the young guys, I put more weight on the older guys getting out and getting into it because you know what it was like to get into it at 30 years old plus. Yeah. And that to me, it's a little harder then because as you get older, you get a little more rigid, you get a little more stodgy in kind of your approach to things. So it's harder to dedicate that time and that type of commitment. And it's harder to come back from some of the injuries and some of the bangs and the bumps. But, we've been going at it for an hour now. I mean, I want to kind of give you the last point on another question. You've seen so much and you've been around the game so much, especially here in Vegas. Do you feel that Vegas is still the best and most exciting place to train for MMA? And do you feel like, I know a lot of people talk about, Atlanta's on the rise, of course, South Florida being one of those places. You're in the heart of it because you're in Extreme. I want to get your take on kind of the people that come through there and the environment and what Vegas brings to the table. Is it still the Mecca?
Yeah, I think it is the Mecca just because if you look at world title fights and all your combat sports, many of them have been held here. The UFC's based here. The Nevada State Athletic Commission's obviously one of the bigger commissions, most well-known, that kind of thing. However, having said that, I mean, there's a lot of really, really good places. So Vegas is a blessing. It certainly, I'm very, very comfortable saying, hey, this is where I'm at. This is where I spend my time. This is where I train. These are the people I'm with. And I don't think that makes me better than anyone, but certainly that.
Proud.
It puts me in a room that's unique. Now, is that room exist in South Florida? For sure. Does it exist in Cali? It does. You mentioned Atlanta's coming up.
Henzo
sure.
and New York.
New York. I mean, come on. So it's not like it's the only room. It's that room and no one else is there. But if you are able and shoot, there's even other gyms here that are really, really good. I mean, there's other guys in this town doing it right. We're not the only ones. But we're comfortable with who we are. I don't worry. I'm not going to attack any of the other guys because I'm comfortable with who we are. Shoot, the Toronto area has got some good MMA.
Yeah.
They've grown. You've got guys. coming from other countries now and having a lot of success. So it's a growing thing, but no matter how much it grows, the room I'm in is
pretty good.
It's pretty good, man. And you say you're there and you're there for a number of years, that means something.
Yeah, and when I say that, it's like you said, it's not a competition. It's just more in Vegas, similar to South Florida, New York, to these different places we bring up. You could walk in one day and you never know who's going to be on the mat.
Without a doubt.
That's one of the things. You just never know who's going to be in there. And there's a lot of really cool faces, and you sometimes you pinch yourself. It's just one of those things.
And here's the other thing that's been really, really good about Extreme is they've been there for a long time. And so you will see guys come and go, and that's the nature of the business. And when a guy's winning and he's with you, it's the best thing in the world. He loses a couple, and it's not uncommon to see him switch and go somewhere else. And a lot of guys will get really offended and loyalty and all this. The guy's either got to say it's our fault or it's his fault. If he says it's his fault, he's not going to win anymore. So whether I think it's his fault or our fault, it really doesn't matter. I understand why guys change sometimes when they run into conflict or problems, and sometimes that helps and sometimes it doesn't. But the bottom line is what I've been so impressed with that's been consistent from Randy to Eric to Ryan, and really those are the guys who are setting the tone in our gym, along with the guys like Ray Seffo. What I've been really impressed with over time and watching them is how, lack of a better word, gracious they are to people. They don't tend to hold a grudge. They could have a guy who used to train with them that then went somewhere else for greener pastures, and then that guy decides he wants to come back. I've seen that happen.
Sure.
I know Jackson's has done that with a couple guys where
Sure.
they left and then they came back. I see the same vibe here. I've never trained at Jackson's. I can imagine what it's like because it's probably very similar to being at Randy's.
Yeah, the grass is always greener, Chad, I think, in everything. And I think it's part of, the culture, the maturation you go through, and, we all go through it. At its core, I think everybody just seeks out filling a hole, like you said, and kind of whatever that hole is. Sometimes, you're killing it and you're learning a ton, and you need more of a mentorship. Maybe you need more of a coaching, whatever it is. But it's just one of those things. It's always going to happen. It's always going to be there, and that's part of the business, like you said. Tell everybody where they can find you and where everybody can look your stuff up and get in touch with you.
So on Instagram, it's C4C Operator or Chad Lyman. I mean, you're probably going to find me if you type in either. Facebook's Chad Lyman or Code 4 Combat, and then I've got a YouTube channel, Chad Lyman is the name of the YouTube channel, and then PFC Training for all of those. PFC Training on Instagram, PFC Training on Facebook, and then PFC also has a YouTube page where not just myself, but some of our other really high-level instructors do a lot of both combatives and weapons-based work.
There he is.
Those things. Yeah, that's me.
And what's the best way to reach out to you? Is it just tap? You're pretty responsive on IG.
Or Messenger.
Or
yeah,
Messenger.
Either one. Definitely, if guys have a question, if you're law enforcement related or not, and you send something to me, I'm going to send it back. I've got like 4,000 posts on Instagram. I'm very active. I post training stuff, encouragement stuff. I post my philosophies, training a lot, consistency over time equals results, those kind of things. You can, and I'm very responsive.
Yeah, no, I noticed that you're quick to get back to folks, and it's a testament to you, and I imagine you do the same thing everybody in law enforcement does. If they're a Leo and they're looking to train, first class is on you, I imagine.
Absolutely.
And you usually do a good job of kind of getting guys out and just getting them in. And
if guys come to Vegas, they do jits or MMA. Extreme's very open.
Yeah.
Not territorial at all. You could wear your patches from your team. We don't care.
And you brought up a good point, just to kind of get close to wrapping, but if your money's tight, we were talking about this, the drop-in at Extreme is dirt. It's $10.
Yeah, it's great.
It's
great. Come drop in. Come drop in, train 4 times a week or 4 times a month.
You're $40.
If you can. And then maybe you can get
You'll
in
figure
more.
it out from there. Yeah, you'll figure it out. Yeah. So it's awesome having you. I can't thank you enough, and I can't thank you enough for your friendship and kind of guidance. And I know it's kind of you'll be stuck with me for a while in many ways, but I appreciate it, and I love those Saturday classes. I've been fortunate enough to get in there four or five times now. Yeah. So it's been a lot of fun, and I thank you for coming out.
Well, we appreciate I appreciate the opportunity to be on. We appreciate when you come and roll with us. Keep coming, brother. Thank you for having me on your show, and I'm a huge fan. And guys, if you're listening to this, follow this show. He's got some great guests lined up coming up.
No, I appreciate it, and I think that's it. Q, we covered everything, right?
That'll do it.
Oh,
man.
wait, no, yeah. Head over to kvar.com. Don't forget that, the plug. And, of course, thanks to Pinkbox, Jesse Ray's. Who'd I forget, Q?
Barbecue and donuts.
Barbecue. What else? Yeah, everything.
That'll do, pig.
That'll do it. We out.